Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I really appreciate you being with me today as we continue with part 3 of our interview with Tullian Tchividjian. Tullian is Billy Graham's grandson, and if you've been listening to his story, you know that he rose to the status of a celebrity preacher, pastoring one of the most respected and well-established churches in the United States, Ridge Presbyterian Church. And then allegations came forth of moral failure, and it was true. Tullian had become involved in at least a couple different adulterous affairs, and as a result of that, everything came crashing down, and Tullian lost virtually everything in his life. His ministry, his career, his job, his family, his marriage, his reputation, and in the darkest of days, he literally despaired of life itself. And if you heard last week's episode as we ended, he was in this very dark, tormented place where he literally was struggling with thoughts of self-harm and suicide. So as we listen today, we're going to continue to hear how God worked powerfully and deeply in Tullian's heart, and how Tullian has become a trophy of God's grace as he's experienced God's very powerful mercy and grace and love in his heart and life. And before we get into that interview, I do want to mention just 2 things. And the first one is that in the near future, I'm going to be publishing an interview with a man named Sam Black. And Sam is the vice president of Covenant Eyes. And many of you are probably familiar with Covenant Eyes. It is a security software program that a person can put on their devices, their laptop computer, their cell phone, etc., that will not allow them to access internet pornography or anything inappropriate. And of course, this is a very practical tool for guys who are struggling with these issues. One of the big challenges with internet porn concerns just the issue of accessibility. When a guy knows that just 1 or 2 clicks is all it takes and he can be looking at something, that is a big temptation for guys to have to deal with in this day and age. And a guy can be doing really good for days and days, weeks, and maybe months at a time, but then he has a tough day, he has a tough few days, he has a fight with his wife, he feels disconnected from God, he feels depressed, and he's excessively tempted. And here is this thing just 1 or 2 clicks away. So when you get in this very vulnerable position, that's where the security of this internet security system can be so helpful and beneficial, because it's like a guardrail. It prevents you from having access in those moments of weakness. So I'm looking forward to this interview with Sam Black so we can learn more about Covenant Eyes and just how this tool can help us in our walk of purity. And I want you guys to know that I've partnered with Covenant Eyes. And if you go to the Power of Purity website, at the very top of the home page, at the top of every page on our website, there's a link entitled Covenant Eyes. And if you click on that link, you can sign up to register and apply Covenant Eyes to your devices. And there's also several articles there that would be of interest for you to check out. One is called Your Brain on Porn. It's an ebook that you can get from Covenant Eyes, and the link is right there on the Power of Purity website. Another ebook they offer is called The Porn Circuit, and something that's very interesting is an article entitled Porn Statistics 2018, where they give us all the information about how pornography is used in this day and age, and how much money people spend on pornography, and how many porn websites there are, and all these different statistics about pornography on the internet and in the United States. So check that out. Go to the Power of Purity website. That's powerofpurity.org, and click on the Covenant Eyes link. And the good news is that Covenant Eyes has arranged a special opportunity for the listeners of the Power of Purity podcast and anybody who registers for Covenant Eyes through the Power of Purity website will get your first 30 days free on Covenant Eyes. So check that out and look forward to that podcast episode where I'll be interviewing Sam Black in the near future. And the final thing I wanted to say is just to acknowledge that when I recorded this interview with Tullian Tchividjian, I normally do my recording over Skype. And for some reason, Tullian was having a problem with his Skype connection. So I recorded the interview in a different format, and the quality just isn't quite what it typically is and what I would prefer. So I do apologize kind of for the quality of this recording. I wish it was a little bit better, but I trust that the content does make up for what is lacking in the quality of the recording itself, and that you will be blessed as you continue to listen to this interview. So welcome to part 3 of our interview with Tullian Tchividjian. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump right back into the interview. God bless you. You knew in your heart you couldn't do this to your kids.
No. After everything I had already put them through, and I had at that point become a new grandfather. My kids are older; they're 23, 21, and 17, and I have one grandchild and one on the way. And they never blinked through this whole thing, either toward their mother or toward me. They never blinked. Like, our relationship was so strong that they never blinked. They were upset, they were sad, they were angry. We had the hard conversations. We talked about the raw stuff that needed to be discussed. We've always been a very open family. We've never bottled things up and kept things hidden. And so we talked it out, and we had the hard conversations, but never once did I feel abandoned by my kids, even though I had in many ways abandoned them by the sin that I did, the selfishness that I exercised. They never abandoned me. They've been remarkable. And so the fact that the idea that I would now hurt them further by taking my own life was too much to bear. And so my prayer was simply, God, just help me get through this hour. Help me get through this day. Help me get through this week. I mean, life became nothing more and nothing less than survival at that point. And for anybody who's in a sort of a season of depression like I was, they understand this. But, minutes feel like days.
Right.
And especially when you're not sleeping and you're not really eating a whole lot. I mean, every moment is hard and painful. And yet, at the same time, fast forward, 3.5 years to today, I am remarried. I met my current wife, Stacy, during the worst season of my life when I was losing everything. She is living proof to me that God gives us His best when we are at our worst. She has loved me through thick and thin. She is a gift from God, and I thank God for her every single day. He has also provided me with some really good, older, wiser friends who did not bail, who stuck with me even though they shouldn't have. They should have probably failed because I was lying to them, manipulating them, using them, and they just stuck with me. And it was Stacy's unconditional love toward me and these friends' unconditional love towards me that really nursed me back to health. And I can now say, even though this would have been impossible for me to say even 3 years ago, I never want to go through anything like that again. And I never want to put anybody else through anything like that again. But in one sense, and in one sense only, I can say, I am so glad God allowed it, because He has set me free in ways that I did not even know that I was enslaved.
Wow.
I mean, he has helped me to see my sin and his grace in ways that I was just blind to before. And so if Jesus fulfills his promise that he came to set the captives free, he did not break that promise when it came to me.
Praise God.
Even through all of the crap, all of the misery that I was causing myself and other people, God was still graciously attentive to me through other people. And so I don't have any of the stuff that I used to have, you know. I still try to figure out, okay, how am I going to pay bills this month, literally. But I am so much more comfortable in my own skin and so much more self-aware. I'm comfortable in my own self, in my own skin, and just so much more self-aware of who I am and my struggles and what my triggers are and where I went wrong and why I went wrong and the damage that I caused and, you know, all of that stuff. I'm free to admit things that I would have been scared to admit before. And so life feels very different. I told someone the other day, I miss almost everything about my former life because I loved it, but I don't miss the former person that I used to be. I'm glad God put that guy to death.
Wow. Very powerful. If I could ask a couple questions, you know, the name of this podcast is The Power of Purity. So I talk a lot about, and there's kind of a theme on the podcast of sexuality, basically the intersection of three things. And I know the podcast is geared primarily to men, although I know that a lot of women do listen to the podcast, but I'm picturing this intersection of God and men and sex. And it's something that a whole lot of guys struggle with. I'm sure that you're aware statistically that 68 to 70% of church-going Christian men view internet porn on a regular basis. So it's something that a whole lot of guys are struggling very deeply with. I use the word plague. I believe that it's a plague, and I'm talking about in the church. So how would you put words, Tullian, to what contributed to your downfall when that whole thing went down? Was it the devil? Was it just your flesh? Was it the stress of being the senior pastor of this mega church? Was it just a moment of weakness? You know, how do you make sense of what happened at that time?
Yeah, boy, that's been 3 years of therapy has helped me come to terms with some of that stuff. But, you know, I would say, Tony, one misconception, and I have a website, just Tullian.net, and I post articles and videos and things like that on there. But I have a place where people can write in. And I literally, my wife and I receive hundreds and hundreds of letters from both men and women who in some way, shape, or form have bottomed out, are bottoming out, or are afraid that they might bottom out. And so we hear stories confidentially from people who would never share their story with anybody else. And I think the reason they share it with me is because, number one, they know they're not going to be judged because I'm guilty of the same crime. And two, I think that they feel like I can probably understand them and what they're going through. And so I, for instance, heard recently from a pastor who did not give me his name, but he said, I am currently having an affair. I need to get out. I don't know what to do. Nobody knows. Please help me. Okay, that was just one. Now, I get hundreds of things like that.
I bet you do,
And so it's given me this huge burden for people in crisis. You know, I've spent a lot of time, even though I've never had any substance abuse issues, alcohol or drugs or anything like that. I have spent a lot of time with people who are in recovery over the last 3 years, and I've spent most of my time with them asking questions and listening. They are some of the most self-aware people I have ever met. There is more honesty in recovery groups oftentimes than there is inside the church.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's remarkable. Yeah, it's remarkable. And so I've listened to people who struggle with alcohol or drugs or sex addiction, and they are just so brutally honest and remarkably self-aware about why they are addicted to this particular issue. But one of the things that I have discovered is that there really is a simplistic caricature of why people have affairs.
Yeah.
And what is typically assumed is that if a man has an affair, it's because he has some sexual need that is not being met. If a woman has an affair, it's because she has an emotional need that is not being met.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't speak for all men, and I certainly can't speak for all women, but I can honestly say, Tony, that, and thankfully this is true, and I think it's important to say this because men need to watch out for this. Don't think that just because you don't have some driving sexual urge that is not being met in your marriage, that you are then free from the possibility of having an affair. Because in my case, and like I said, I can't speak to every other case, but in my case, that was not the problem. The problem was not that I had this deep sexual void and this, driving sexual desire that was not being met. There was things going on inside my relationship with my wife at the time, and I blame myself for this. But there was just I was seeking to fill an emotional void, not a physical one. In my case,
okay.
It was not this. It's not like I was addicted to pornography and just had this kind of real sex drive that was insatiable, and that was not the case for me. I mean, that just wasn't. I think sometimes that happens anytime they, when an affair, especially with a public person, is exposed, they automatically think this whole thing's about sex. This whole thing is about the physical. And that's just not true. At least for me, it's not. And I've discovered that it's not true for a lot of guys out there, that there are a lot of guys out there who end up going outside of what God has provided for them, or they think it's easier to find someone else to fill their emotional void than it is to work on it with their spouse, and go seek help with their spouse, and to go get counseling with their spouse, and so that they can try to understand each other better and sort of learn what it means all over again to love one another unconditionally and find satisfaction and fulfillment inside the marriage. So my issue, I think, in looking back was enough emotional disconnect had happened that it seemed, and I would have never said this at the time because I wasn't aware of this, but it seemed easier to succumb to the opportunities I had outside of the marriage than it was to work on things inside of the marriage.
I see.
This is, and it's not, this isn't rocket science, I mean, it's a very typical case of, feeling a little bit empty in the relationship that you have. Something else comes around. It makes you feel like you're a 16-year-old kid again who has his first crush on a girl, and it seems to fill this emotional void that you have, and you feel alive again, you feel young again, and you just give into it.
Right.
And I think that is, I also say this, too, and I know this is going to sound kind of silly, but midlife crises are freaking real.
Right.
They are real. And I have talked to numerous men and women in their 40s, so, 40 to 50, and I go, you're not free from the possibility of having an affair before you're 40, and you're not free from the possibility of having an affair, from 50 on. But I will say this, that almost anybody and everybody I know in their 40s, I mean from 40 to 50, faces at some point in time in that decade a crisis where they've lived half of their life. Many people wish that they were further along than they are. They expected to be further along when they were younger at this point in their lives. They wonder if this is all that there is, They are at a time where they're young enough that they have opportunity to maybe explore things outside of their marriage or outside of their profession or whatever the case may be. Some of them are lamenting the fact that they're getting older and they want to feel young again. Whatever the case may be, it's different for every person. But in my opinion, the 40s are a potentially disastrous decade for men and women, because I have watched more people, including myself, throw their lives away and everything they have built in their 40s because they succumb to believing that there's got to be more to life than this, and the grass has to be greener on the other side. And I'm here to tell you that the grass is absolutely not greener on the other side, that the answer to whatever marriage problem you have is not found outside of your marriage. An affair never, ever solves the problem that you're looking to solve. Ever. It exacerbates the problem, and it has the potential to absolutely destroy your life and the lives of everybody in your life. And there's just not a day that goes by that I do not have to live with the guilt and shame and regret of what I did that hurt and destroyed other people. And I could say sorry for the rest of my life every day, and it wouldn't be enough. And having to live with that is not an easy thing to live with. And I have to, of course, revisit the gospel every day of my life and be reminded that my guilt has been atoned for and my shame has been covered
Thank
by
God.
the righteousness of Christ. Yes, thank God. That's my only lifeline. But it is the horizontal consequences of having an affair or going outside of your marriage to satisfy whatever longing you have is destructive, disastrous, catastrophic, and tragic in every imaginable way. And oftentimes, I had heard people say this to me my whole life, but you don't really know how catastrophic and destructive it is until you live through it. And then you just, it's sickening. It's really sickening.
Wow.
And so it's a dark place. I thank God for life after death. I thank God that He's brought me to the other side, and He's given me an awareness of the kind of destruction that selfishness and sin can wreak on someone's life and the lives of other people. But, my choices broke my family forever. And I'm grateful that I have a great relationship with my kids. And I'm grateful that my ex-wife and I have forgiven each other and all of those things. But that doesn't change the fact that life is broken in ways that it wasn't broken 4 or 5 years ago.
So, praise be to God, what a powerful story. And it sounds like it turns out that Tullian is a sinner after all and needs a Savior just like everybody else.
I think that's the thing, too, Tony, that surprises people. I think when Christian leaders fall, like, when they have an affair or they're guilty of this, that, or the other, sadness is expected. A feeling of betrayal is expected, but it still boggles my mind that people are shocked. It exposes the fact that we, as a church culture, have grown to expect that the pastor is different than us, that the preacher is on a different level than we are, that the sinful humanity of a preacher is somehow less than the sinful humanity of the parishioner. And, I hear from pastors all the time who have crashed and burned, and not all of the contributing factors, but one of the contributing factors is that they never felt the freedom to be flawed. And so they spend years sort of covering up their flaws and not dealing with their flaws because they are afraid, understandably so, that they will be rejected if they reveal their humanity in its darkest places.
Right.
And so they end up acting out in secret over here or over there, and And there has to be some sort of change that happens. I said that when I was a pastor, I used to say, if you knew everything about me that God knows, you wouldn't come to this church. And
Right.
if I knew everything about you that God knows, I'd be scared to have you in this church. But we absolutely need churches where it is safe to confess our sins and our secrets and our struggles, and that includes church leaders and pastors, because if that dark stuff, and we all have it, we all have sins and secrets and dark places, if that dark stuff is not given a place to be brought to the light safely, it will explode.
Right.
It will absolutely explode. And so churches have to be a place where for both the people who come to the church leaders, and the pastors, number one, realize we all have sins, we all have secrets, and we all have a darker side than we care to admit. All of us do. We're sinners. And as Jack Miller used to say, cheer up, you're a lot worse off than you think you are. And I think that's important to recognize. But A, recognize that, and then B, make sure we provide a safe place for Christians and church leaders and pastors to be able to confess their sins and struggles and secrets, and to bring their dark side into the light without fear that they're going to lose their friends, lose their job. These guys are typically trained in such a way that they don't know what else to do to earn a living, and they're like, well, if someone knew that I was struggling with this, I might lose my job, and I have no other way to support my family, so they just keep it a secret.
Right.
Instead of getting the help that they need and finding support in the church to get the help they need. So they have this, they feel this pressure to be, in a sense, sinless.
Right.
And I think, it's interesting, but churches love when you tell them that you are a broken person just like they are, until you do something that broken people do. And then they cast you out.
Right.
They love, they love when you talk about grace until you are the one that is in need of it. And then they don't know what to do with it, because their expectation is that you're supposed to have it all together. You're supposed to be the model citizen. And if you're not, then we have to find someone who will be, instead of realizing this guy's just as jacked up as I am.
Right.
And I expect him to sin just as much as I expect myself to sin. And I expect him to have secrets and to have a dark side, because I know my own secrets and my own dark side. And to sort of approach it that way. So I've long wished that the church would feel more like AA than it currently does.
Right. So all of that speaks of work that the church has to do, maybe to become a safer community and a healthier community, a kind of spiritual hospital that will allow all of us to recuperate and heal together in the shadow of God. I was going to ask you, I had a 4-part question. I think in a very real way you've already been answering it, but my question was, everything that you went through, what did it teach you about, and I had 4 things. What did it teach you about yourself? What did it teach you about God? What did it teach you about marriage? And what did it teach you about church and Christians?
Man, those are some amazing questions. Well, I'll try to answer them in a short form kind of way.
Hey guys, I hate to do it, but I see from the clock that we're out of time for today's episode, so I need to jump in here. But if you're able to come back next week, we will continue this interview with Tullian Tchividjian, and I know that you will be blessed as you continue to hear this story and how powerful God's redemption is, even in the heart and life of a deeply, deeply broken man. And I am very thankful for that myself, because the fact is that I am a very deeply wounded and broken man, and I'm very grateful for God's grace and His mercy, His love, His forgiveness, and His redemption that's offered to us through the blood of Christ. So I just encourage you guys to go on in your walk of purity Have a blessed week. Have a blessed day, and God bless you. I'll look forward to seeing you right back here at the Power of Purity podcast next week. Until then, be blessed, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.